This is ZEISS Presents Full Exposure, the weekly resource for news, trends, and the people who influence the world of photography and cinematography. Hosted by veteran photographer and filmmaker Jim Kamp.
As an award-winning writer, director, producer, editor, and actor, Ann Lupo wears a lot of hats. A graduate of NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, she has worked as an editor on music videos, commercials, and a feature documentary for CNN. Her feature film debut is In Reality, a romantic autobiographical film on love and longing that's funny and poignant, mixing fantasy and reality. It's due to be released on VOD soon. For In Reality, Ann wrote, directed, produced, edited, and starred, and has even taken on self-distribution of her film. In Reality is screened at 13 film festivals domestically and internationally, winning 9 awards, including the Jury and Audience Award at the Austin Film Festival and the Special Jury Mention at the Los Angeles Film Festival. We spoke with Ann at 368 in Lower Manhattan. But first, we'll take a look at the trailer for In Reality.
There's this narrative or maybe truth to be in love with someone, and for them to be in love with you is one of the holiest experiences you can have on this earth.
I want to keep hanging out as friends.
I'm making a film about me.
Take 2, Mark.
And my feelings for you.
Hey, Ann.
Hi, Jim.
Nice to see you here, meet you,
Great
be
to
at
meet
this
you.
really cool space.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
368.
Thanks for coming here. I'm really happy that we were able
Well, I
to do
wasn't
this.
going to come, but the backdrop just totally sold me. The pink,
Right.
it's
figured.
my color.
Yeah.
So I was telling you when we didn't come on, before we came on, that there's another filmmaker we interviewed also from Connecticut originally, who had a very similar sort of track in doing a passionate project, a personal project. Mm-hmm. Your film is very personal. Tell me a little bit about what that whole track was like for you to want to make something that was so personal. And of course, it's also very humorous and light, but tell us about it.
Yeah, so it all started 4 years ago, pretty much to the day, actually, I know that because I had seen a short film that directed by Bianca Guyver for This American Life that was about a Valentine's Day story, and I saw that and I was like, I could tell my own story in this kind of way. Like maybe I'll just start making a project about it, because basically what was happening was I had been in love with this guy who I had a brief romance with, and then he told me that he just wanted to be friends, and we had hit it off so well that I just didn't understand, or I didn't believe him that he didn't really want to be with me. So I just, was his friend for a year, and we kept hanging out, and I kept being in love with him and not really seeing what was really happening, which is just that he didn't like me that way, or we didn't like each other in the same way. So a year had gone by, and I was still in this state, and I saw that video, and then I also saw another film called The Stories We Tell, which is another personal autobiographical documentary by a female filmmaker about her, a different type of story, but full feature-length film about a personal story. And my wheels just started turning, and I was like, okay, maybe what I need to do is just make a little short film about this, and I'll figure out love. That was...
It'll be your catharsis.
Yeah, I will learn to love more intelligently, and I'll get over this guy, and I'll figure out why and how it is possible that I have been in love with someone who didn't love me back. That was the nut that I wanted to crack, because I just didn't get it. I was 23. And so it was going to be a short film that I was just going to I was going to interview myself in my bedroom with my little, Rode mic, and take that audio, bring it into editing software, create like a radio edit of it, and then shoot inserts and kind of collage like visuals to tell the story.
Would you think that was going to run? How long did you think
it was going to be 10 minutes
10
tops.
minutes,
I really just was going for like a Vimeo staff pick. That was all I really wanted. And actually just at the end of the day, I just wanted to make something that was in my own style and voice, because I'd been editing and working for other people for a while. So I felt like this was a good time to a story that I knew I could really dive into, because I was obsessed with figuring it out. So I started working on that short film, and then around that time, and I like to say fate intervened, because I reconnected with an old classmate, Esteban Pedraza, who I went to school with, and he asked me what I was up to, and I was like, I'm making this weird film. It's going to be autobiographical, but I'm going to try to play some characters in it and like work out some emotional stuff while I'm at it. And he was like, that sounds really weird and really cool. Do you need help with that? And I was like, yes, actually, I really do. And the main thing was that I couldn't really get to the bottom of what I was trying to get to by interviewing myself, because you can't see your own blind spots.
Sure.
And you can't ask yourself the questions that you don't know that you need to be asked. So I had him and his business partner and writing partner at the time, Aaron, who was also another classmate and a dear friend, interview me. And that was basically what got the ball rolling on it growing into what then became a series. And it became clear that there was a lot more that I needed to say, not just about this particular relationship, but about romance and love and an exploration of myself, basically.
So it was basically at that point it was just really loosely scripted?
Yeah, very loosely scripted. And it was more like a web series, like web comedy, kind of just on the surface. And then when we did the interview, it was like, whoa, we're diving.
So how did it then evolve into what it started to become?
Yeah, so it really, really is all due to the team of collaborators that came together. And that's why I say fate intervened, because we all were at this certain point in our young budding careers where we wanted a challenge and we wanted to take on a project that we could really sink our teeth into. And it just so happened that I had this idea and told Esteban about it, and Aaron, and they were on board, and so they became my writing partners and ended up becoming my co-directors, because I'm on camera throughout the movie or the project. So I needed that objectivity to direct me in my performance and make sure that we were getting the best stuff out of me. And then Nadine Martinez, who's my DP, who's someone that I had known for years and had been making movies with, and so we already had a shorthand. And she was just also down to spend everyone was just down to spend all their weekends, all their spare time working on this project. And then the real cincher was when Holly Meal joined the production. She's my producer our producer, and she took it from me just kind of spending my spare cash and money on it to we need a budget, we need to apply to grants, we need to apply to IFP, we need to run a Kickstarter, let's step it up. And so everyone had their absolute strength, and I like to think that we all complemented each other's strengths and weaknesses, and so it was really just the five of us for a long time making this movie. And some of us, Aaron would have to do the sound sometimes, and Esteban would, we would all be just running around on the streets of Bushwick shooting at first, and then it grew.
Well, I mean, at what point, you're talking about that, actually having a budget, actually it growing in scope and so forth. You've been doing something parallel with this piece you put together, Diary of an Independent, DIY. Diary of an Independent Filmmaker. I'm not getting the title right.
Yes, it's the Diary of an Independent Filmmaker. Okay. Which is
but DIY filmmaking, isn't it right?
We're in that video right now.
Right now. What is it you want to get across through that? because
that video?
because you're doing it. You were
Again.
doing it. Well, you're sort of doing it again, and you kind of started from a place where you never thought you would end up in a project growing.
Yeah. So the Diary of an Independent Filmmaker, this video, is this movie was never meant to be a feature film. Like I said, it was meant to be a short film, and that's why I thought it was possible to tell that vulnerable of a story, because it was just going to be 10 minutes. It's just like, I'll put it on the internet and I'll move on, and then I won't have to,
And you would have flushed it out of your system.
I'll be great. I'll be cured of all the things. And then it just kept growing, and the twists and turns that this whole production took, the number of changes of course, of expectations and then disappointments, but then resurgence of passion and support and chance encounters and then opportunities, everything happened to this production. And I find the process of making this movie was almost as interesting as the movie itself, because it was such a journey, and there were a lot of very scary and dark times, at least for me, because I had put myself in such a vulnerable place for a really long time as the subject, also the director, trying to lead this production. I was also producing it, also just trying to gather all the resources, which is what most all independent filmmakers have to do, but I think the difference was that I was also exposing some very dark emotional waters to myself, and that all kind of was just very challenging at certain points. And then coming out of that period, when we got the opportunity to make it into a feature, that was one of the main big turning points, because it wasn't a automatic yes. I actually really didn't know if I could continue working on the project at that point. It was done. It was 60 minutes. It was going to be a web series that we were going to put up online, and I was ready to be done with it. But then I found it in myself to continue, because I knew that it could be better, and I knew that there was more to the story that needed to be told, and I wanted to make it the best version of the original vision that I had for it at the very, very beginning. And so we took the opportunity, but then I was able to figure out, okay, how am I going to make this safe for myself, as far as creating some distance between the character that I'm playing, that is still myself, but also making the production not an all-encompassing emotional journey. Which it always ends up being anyway, but It's got to be autobiographical filmmaking has got to be really difficult, because that's kind of what you're doing. You're exposing yourself, to one degree or another. So you're doing that, and you're also raising money. You're the de facto kind of head of the whole thing, writer, producer, director, actress, actor, editor. Yeah.
How do you keep it all together when you're doing so many things? I mean, and plus you're doing it on a shoestring.
Yeah.
This is what everybody's going to ask you when they say, "So how did
you do this?"
How did you do this?
Well, I think the thing that was one of those sentences that begins and then backtrack. Once again, because it didn't start as a feature, and I never thought that was what I was doing, it kept growing so incrementally, and we kept receiving more feedback and support in these stages. So I had these months in which to recharge myself and find the courage to continue going forward.
Yeah, because maybe if you did think it was a feature at first, it would have been too daunting to.
I would never have been able to do I could never have been I'm making a feature film about myself at 23 years old.
Right.
So I grew every time something happened. I had to completely turn over my brain and learn a new skill and no greater growth has happened than with the self-distribution phase of learning what that side of it is, because that was something that I'd never really thought I would have to be responsible for.
Well, talk a little bit about that, the whole, having to navigate the festival circuit. And that is sort of, kind of, linked to the distribution circuit. Although some people are saying festivals are kind of becoming less relevant because deals are being made before festivals. I don't know how globally true that is, but what was that like?
Okay, well, first and foremost, every independent filmmaker fantasy that I had coming into this process has been totally leveled, and it's just a completely different landscape than I had ever imagined it to be. And I'm assuming a lot of people have the same delusions that I had, that I'll make the best film that I could possibly make. It'll be like nothing you've ever seen before, because I wanted to blend all these genres, and that is what the market, that's what will make us sell. We'll sell the movie for $1 million, and I know that this is what the people want. And that's just not how it works anymore at all. And so what happened for us, and just to give you a little bit of the, I think we skipped over a couple of things, but basically it became a series. After we were running around in Bushwick, we fundraised on Kickstarter, raised $45,000, and we shot. We finished the series with that money, shot our most theatrical and wonderful scenes, like the musical number and the game show, and all of that was used with that money. And then we applied to Sundance and applied to festivals. Didn't get in, but we went to Sundance anyway, just to be there and to see what was out there. And that's where we met the Winnie Kamp and Ellie, don't know her last name, Winnie Kamp of Super Deluxe, who saw what we had, this 60-minute cut that was supposed to be episodic, and they loved it, but they said, this isn't done. We want you to add 30 minutes to it and make it into a feature. And that was what that big decision was about. So then I ultimately decided, yes, I will do that. So we went back into production a year later, reshot scenes, I added this whole storyline with Kamiko Glenn, who plays my best friend in the movie, and just fleshed that out and made it more of an, it was always in there, but it just needed to be propped up a bit more. And then finished shooting, went back into the edit, added the new footage into what we already had, and made sure that it actually flowed and didn't feel like, because if you really look hard, my face changes from when I was 24 to 26, because it was shot over 3 years.
Wow.
And then edited, applied to Sundance again. That was a year ago. Yeah. And then didn't get into any of the big festivals. Was super upset about that, because the general vibe of the film industry is if you don't get into one of those festivals, your film essentially doesn't exist, and you have no chance of being bought by a distributor. You have no chance of it being seen. And so at that point, really, it was very scary, because I had just extended the uncomfortable 3-year stage that I'd already been in to make this into a movie that I thought was going to be, taken into the world by someone else who knew how to do that. And so we were kind of on our own. And then we did start getting into festivals, and for without any rhyme or reason, they all kind of lined up very efficiently and coincidentally from September to November this past fall. And that was an unbelievably restorative period of time for me, because it was just finally what I always wanted, which was just to share something that I had made with other people. And of course, I was so proud to have actually seen it all the way through to create the final version of what it needed to be, which is a feature film. But that feeling of connecting with the audience and connecting with people who really connect with the movie, and doing the thing that I wanted it to do, which is kind of just make the movie that I needed to see when I was in that stage.
Well, I mean, it's I mean, I'm sure it's no mystery that, festivals are kind of male-dominated. So because it's such a sensitive, female-centric story about one woman's, dealing with, you're trying to figure out what love is and so forth, do you think that was a major hampering factor to hitting the festival?
Yeah. So I really had not let that thought cross my mind once in this whole thing, because I find it's not productive for me to, assume that there's a gender bias against me. I'm here to make my work. I'm here to tell my stories and do the best that I can do in that regard. But it did come to my attention recently from a female programmer who programmed our film that she had to beg, scream, put her foot down, even cry, and send the movie out to all of her friends to get validation that this was a movie worth programming in this particular festival, because she was the one female programmer of 5 other male programmers. And when she told me that, it was like, whoa, thank you for sharing that information, because I don't want that to, how could I know if that had anything to do with it? But it did reveal to me that there just might be more of a taste and standard bias against certain movies and what they someone's taste in what a cinematic film is. And I think that was more of what I gathered from that. It was the other films that were programmed were a little bit grittier and darker and really cinematic and a little fucked up. And I guess that's kind of what I took away from it, was that's those people's taste in what they think good movies are, and they just might have never really sat down and considered a more female story. But what's great is that and that was more productively enraging than anything. I just was like, okay, I get it now. But we won the audience award in the end, so it doesn't matter. But wait, there was something I want to say about that, which was it's gone.
What, you mean let me just if I can move to one other
Please.
thing. I think a lot of people would agree that some of the best directors started as editors, because you kind of know what you need, you know what you are missing, So when you approach this from what you were looking for, of course it was an evolution, as the project evolved. It's a really cool visual style. You mixed a lot of formats, from Super 8, black and white. I mean, you kind of ran the gamut, and it's a really nice looking film too. So how did you arrive at that visual sort of style?
Well, first things first, about the editing. I am an editor by trade. I've been doing commercial editing, documentary editing for years now, and I started, my first love of filmmaking was editing. My dad sat me down in front of Final Cut Pro 3, when I was 12 or something.
Final Cut Pro 3?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And I just took to it really naturally, and it became my obsession and thing that I was most interested in. And so editing has always been a part of my life, and I love it. And I really do enjoy sitting there for hours and tinkering away at edits and just finding new ways to tell the story. But then as far as the visuals and the more theatrical, saturated, world that I like to exist in, I don't know where that came from, except that it has always been the way that I directed the short experimental films that I would make with my friends in the summers or in my spare time. I talked about this a little bit in another video, but I grew up going up to Canada in the summers, and my family and I would make these really eccentric, weird D horror movies together with the mini DV camera, and it was kind of the thing that we would do for fun to pass the time. And we would grab the costumes from the costume bin and big performances and bad audio and bad acting and all of that. And then as I got older and I went to film school and I, gathered creative friends, I started bringing them up to the house in Canada to have like an artist retreat as well, where we could, without any of the restrictions of money or time or the professors telling you what is good and what's not, we could just make whatever we wanted. It was very romantic, but it was real. And so during those trips, I made 3 movies where everyone acted in them, and even if they weren't an actor, and they're very hyperbolic and absurd and silly, but it was how I tested out my ideas of how I like to shoot things, the performances that I like to get, this kind of like fine line of quirky, absurd humor, but then veers into the reality. And that was how we arrived at the visual world, or how I arrived at it. And then as far as the technical side of things, and like Nadine Martinez, my DP, was with me on all of those trips, and so that's how we developed the shorthand that we have. So she knows how I like things framed and how, and then she also has her own absurd tastes in like wild cinema that she knows that I don't know anything about, so she'll bring that to it. And then we, around the same time that I had started ruminating on this idea, she and I bought a Sony FS7 together because we wanted to take a step forward in our work. And so we had that camera, and that was also kind of what allowed us to just pick it up whenever we needed to shoot, and shoot some pickups here. Who's free on Saturday? Like, let's go.
Exactly.
And just while I have this thought in my mind, another key person on our team is Miles G. Jackson, who's my co-star, who plays my love interest, and he was also on those trips to Canada, and he also, I consider an essential team member of this whole thing, because he was there from the very beginning, up for this really bizarre format of making a movie. And he's the only person that I knew who could play that role and who I could be in that role with, because we were already so comfortable with each other, and I knew that I could trust him with everything.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it's such a personal story, so to not have, like, it makes sense to not have somebody who's, you don't have know well in that role make it even so much more difficult. Yeah,
no, it was really important that we were already extremely close, and I'd already, done so many weird short film movies with him that he was game for it.
Yeah. So as you reflect back on this, you're now in the stage where, let's see, you've got a VOD premiere coming up,
yes.
Right? We'll talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so now we're in the self-distribution stage, which came about because...
This is the fun stuff, right?
Yeah, this is the fun stuff. It actually is fun, but it's a little strange. It's like a new territory and a new...
That you had another thing you had no idea you were going to be doing.
But it is the way right now, as far as I can tell from this position. So we had the great festival tour in the fall, played at a lot of amazing festivals, great audiences. We won some awards. It was really wonderful. We had an offer for a distribution deal that just didn't make any sense. And from what I have gathered from other filmmakers, it's kind of a normal thing these days. Is like you just aren't going to get the money that you think you're going to get from one of these deals. So we decided to self-distribute, which means that we're in charge of getting it out to the world, and that includes having a VOD deal with a digital aggregator. We're partnered with Giant Pictures, and they are who's helping us get it on iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, all of the VOD platforms. But then it's up to us to do the marketing, the publicity, and just like figuring out how to get people to know that this movie exists. It's really important that we did the festival circuit, because all of those people who saw the movie can hopefully be our cheerleaders and champions when it becomes public, but it also, like, we just can't actually compete with the landscape right now because we don't have a big marketing budget. We don't have all the money to blast this in your face and put it on all of a billboard or anything. So what I'm really relying on and what I feel really passionate about too is just word of mouth and natural, good old word of mouth. Because
I mean, you're even doing the poster and the art yourself and so on, right?
That was the other thing. Well, when we had that one distribution offer, it was, I'm so involved in every aspect of this movie. I edited it, I've looked at every piece of footage we ever shot, and I've been a commercial editor for 10 years. I've sold many a product for other people, and I was telling him, or this person, that, and I said, hey, so yeah, I cut the trailer and I would like to cut the next one, and I would also like to be involved in like the poster art and all that stuff. And the best that we could negotiate with this person was meaningful consultation, and he also more or less was like, with all due respect, like, we don't want you involved. And I was like, then we can't work together because I need to be involved and I need to be the person making, I don't know, that's also, I guess, some people might not want to do what I'm doing, but I feel like I have to. And like, I've made 4 different posters because I just think it's fun. And I like finding new ways to test out ideas of like what is working and what are people reacting to. Like, for instance, we made these Valentine's Day posters yesterday for our new trailer launch. I'll show you them offline.
Yeah, definitely. We'll show one.
But yeah, so I'm making the posters, I'm doing all the social media and all of that.
Plus, again, it's a really personal project.
Yeah.
And you really want to have the control over it. I mean, I can completely understand that.
Yeah. It's also, I think, so when we did find ourselves at the reality of self-distribution, like we had exhausted all of the fantasies of being picked up by our dream distributor and all of that, it felt actually so relieving because that's the way this movie was made. Like, it was handmade, DIY, start to finish, and like, it feels so natural that this is how we would distribute it because it was meant for this, of all the types of movies. So I have found it very exciting and empowering, not without its like moments of like, what am I doing? Should I be making more films? Probably. Like, I want to make another movie at some point. I've gotten to that point of wanting to dive back in again. But yeah, the promotional stuff is important because otherwise, like, who's going to know the movie exists?
Right. So it's going to be premiering where?
We are doing a week-long theatrical in Los Angeles, March 28th through April 4th. Then it will become live on iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, all the VOD platforms. We're doing screening here at 368.
Oh, wow.
And at the Nighthawk in Brooklyn. In Williamsburg. And then I'm taking it on like a limited theatrical tour for the rest of April. So we're in San Francisco, Phoenix, Austin, Portland, and more dates to come.
How do you do all? I mean, how do you arrange all of that? It seems like a monumental task.
Theatrical booking is the craziest part of this whole thing. It's like impossible. So Holly, my producer, guardian angel, it's basically her and I speaking 1,000 times a day on all these things. I have taken the lead on the content creation because that's my strength. She takes the lead on the theatrical booking and all other administrative tasks that I do not have the clarity for. We're good. We balance each other quite well. So we sent out about 100 cold emails to every independent film theater in the country, and they don't respond to you unless they're being contacted by a theatrical booker, and you have to pay a theatrical booker to do that job, and we don't have the money to do that. So we just decided that we'll get what we can get, and we'll use our connections from the film festivals the programmers who have been our champions, they can introduce us to these people, and we'll just see what comes back to us. And the places that have come back to us have been really gracious, and we're really excited to screen there. And I'm going, which is another incentive to do the Q&A. But I reckon, though, that potentially, if those screenings do well, we'll get more theaters reaching out to us to program it. But if not, then it'll be available online.
So, in the realm of DIY filmmaking, what would you say as you look back on this whole sojourn you've been on to somebody who might be starting something like this, and taking it, however they started, small or maybe a little more ambitious, and it growing? What would you say to them as far as you looking back and your advice, if you will?
Yeah. Buckle up, because it's going to be a ride. For sure, you just can't imagine all the things that are going to happen. I was about to say go wrong, but that's not really the attitude. Things are going to happen. You're going to be disappointed. Like, it's not going to go your way. Well, I will say that there are many other ways to make movies besides the way that I made this one. We like to say that this was reverse engineered. So if you are going into a project that is more experimental and it's like finding its way, and I think that this actually is more common now than ever, because people want to see proofs of concept. So the short that we made was the proof of concept for the Kickstarter that became the series, and then the Kickstarter was the proof of concept for the feature. And so I don't know if I would have gotten the financial backing to make the feature had I not even had anything to show for myself. So I know that a lot of features are being made from shorts. And so I would just say, like, if there is an idea that you are obsessed with, you have to be obsessed with it, because it will maybe be your life for the next several years. You have to still be curious and really interested in what you're talking about, because that is what sustains the creative vision and also your endurance to continue telling the story. And I have, just realized that the topics that I cover and in reality are what my topics. Like, they're the things that I find the most interesting, and the things that I want to tell stories about. So, and then continuing back to your question, so get used to this, like, ups and downs and obstacles and having
disappointment. I think you said the challenges, the setbacks. I mean, you had a whole litany in your in your
challenges,
keynote.
disappointments, setbacks, frustrations, despair. Just dive into that and then find. So when that happens, it's your job to find the yes when everyone is telling you no. So, like, so many times throughout this process, people, not because they were trying to, discourage me, but mostly because they were trying to give me some good advice, would say no, or that's not how you do it. It's this way. And I just be like, no, I have to do it this way. And so you just have to find people that understand the way that you need to work and how you want to work to make sure that you can work that way. And then I'm trying to think what else it was in that keynote. Because the next thing was I guess part of what I've been definitely ruminating on right now is, so, like, my movie, as you know, is about the balance between fantasy and reality when it comes to love, and so the exploration of romance and love and what you want it to be versus what it mostly is most of the time. And right now I've been really thinking about, and fantasy and reality is just this, like, central theme of my life, or all of our lives, I don't know, I can only speak for myself, but right now is about the balance between fantasy and reality of filmmaking and being a creative person, because you have these fantasies of success and what success looks like, and it's like the deal and the festival and the awards and the big box office and people and like the critics, like whatever it is for you. And I think it's okay to have those fantasies because they're what propel you forward and like make you want to make the best thing that you possibly can, at least for me. But you can't get bogged down in that, and you have to remind yourself why you're actually doing it, which is because you have something to say and you have something to express and you want to connect with people. And like I said, that's what the festival circuit was for me, like totally restored my sense of perspective on what this whole thing was about. And it's really important to like find those reminders wherever you can. And yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I've said it before, maybe I sound like a broken record to myself, but, you know, it's just kind of like what they talk about as far as authors and what you write, and it's, you know, I think it's a similar thing in filmmaking is do what you know, you know, and you did something here very personal, obviously, but something that you knew and you wanted to explore, and I think in the end, you had said something like after all that, the disappointment, the challenges, all that, you said trust your gut.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, trust your gut. Like there's so many times when people were giving me advice, and you have to seek advice from other people when you don't know what you're doing. We really didn't know what we were doing. I didn't. And they would give me advice, and then I would take the advice and I would be doing it, and my gut was just like screaming that it was not the right thing. And from finding ourselves back here where self-distribution and kind of the ball is back in my court, or like the control is back in my hands. Mm-hmm. In retrospect, it was like, yeah, I was uncomfortable because there was something that was wrong, and like I should have trusted myself a little bit more, and that I think is a learned process as well. Just knowing what and how you like to work, and how what you need to get your best work done.
Mm. Well, April 2nd, give yourself a shout out.
Yes.
The name of the film is?
In Reality, my movie is going to be available on iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, and all the VOD platforms April 2nd. We're doing a limited theatrical tour across the country from the end of March to the end of April. And if anyone actually wants to screen the movie, just please reach out, because we're open to that, and I'll fly to you and say hello.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, best of luck with it. It's a
Thank you.
lovely film.
Thank you so much.
And it looks beautiful, and you know, it's very touching.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you. I have one more thing.
Yeah, sure.
Just back to the shout out.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were talking about with self-distribution, it's so up to the audience, or I'm putting, once it releases, it's in the audience's hands, and
Right.
I will, do my best to promote it, but it's up to the people who it connects with to continue to pass it on and share it if they like it. So if anyone out there likes it, please continue to share it with people, because that's all we can really do to compete in the landscape that is out there right now. It's word of mouth. It's something that is really naturally connecting with people, and it's not being shoved in their faces.
Mm.
So that's how I'd like this movie to exist.
And you're proof that if you stick with something that you really believe in, you'll have something nice in the end to show for it. Trust your gut.
Trust your gut.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
In Reality premieres on VOD April 2nd, 2019 on Amazon, iTunes, and Google Play. The official site is inrealityfilm.com. Our thanks to Patrick Russell and the staff at 368 in New York City for hosting Full Exposure.
Thanks for tuning in. Join us next time for another edition of ZEISS Full Exposure. If you can't watch, you can always catch the audio-only version on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at ZEISS_Full Exposure, or on the web at ZEISSFullExposure.com. And to learn more about the latest in ZEISS lenses, head to ZEISS.com.